Hello, guys, and welcome into the C Team Pod. This is episode 19, and today we are going to be going over the team that we have ranked 25th in our preseason NFL power rankings, and that's going to be the Washington Commanders. And I'm going to be joined by Sam Fortier, who writes and I believe is the editor or he's the Commanders beat writer for the Washington Post. Sam, thank you very much for joining me. Hello.
Can you hear me? Hello.
I can hear you now. Yes, I can.
I just said thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. I know you're on a little bit of a time crunch here, so let's get right into it. What do you think went wrong for the Commanders last season?
Yeah, I think there were a couple things. The first being when you lose your starting quarterback 1.5 quarters into the season, I think your ceiling is going to get lowered. That's for every NFL team, right? Uh, I don't think any NFL team would be set up to succeed with a backup all year. I think Taylor Heineke, probably comparatively did pretty well. And then I think the defense, Jack Del Rio's unit, starting off really slow. That was a big reason that they could not obviously overcome their COVID and injury situations late in the year. So I think it was, and I think the defensive slow start was mostly because the team could not get on the same page in the secondary. They rotated three defenders and kept Landon Collins there longer than they should have. He's a box safety. They tried to play him in the field. And anytime you have a guy of his speed going deep, as you saw in New Orleans Saints in week 5, that's not going to work out. So I think the inability to shift defensively started slow, injuries, and, it's the NFL, so a certain amount of luck as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was, and along with a lot of other NFL fans, we're just kind of shocked at how beatable the Commanders defense looked last year, especially coming off of a season, or I guess the year prior, where it just felt like they were giving Tom Brady fits in the year that they wound up going and winning the Super Bowl. So I think it was a little shocking for everyone to see. But obviously in the offseason, the Commanders, they went out and made a big move. They acquired Carson Wentz, who's he's familiar to the NFC East. What do you think? What are the expectations? Do you think for Wentz in his third stop in the NFL?
I mean, Troy Aikman said it in March. This is Carson Wentz's last chance to prove that he could be a franchise quarterback in the NFL. And I think that 2020 for Carson Wentz, when things kind of imploded in Philly, I don't think he's that bad. But I also don't think he's probably as good as we saw in 2017 during his MVP caliber year where he tore the ACL. So I think that he's a high variance player. You kind of get on a roller coaster when you roll with him. You got to take the good and the bad. I think a good distillation of that is last year in Indianapolis. Everybody remembers, I think, the collapse against Jacksonville in Week 18. But if you go back the week before, they really needed to beat the Arizona Cardinals, who obviously weren't at full strength, but he still really came out and I think played a great game. So you got to ride those roller coasters with him, and you got to hope your defense can pick you up when he's not on. So Carson Wentz is obviously a gamble for Ron Rivera and company, but I also am of the mind that I don't think they had a really obvious home run pick available. So when you're in that position, you got to say, hey, do we want to take our shot on one of these guys in the draft? Or do we want to say, okay, Carson Wentz brings a certain floor as an NFL starter, and we'll roll with him. And I totally understand why Ron Rivera in year 3 decided to go with Wentz over a Malik Willis or any of those other guys.
Yeah, and especially when you see what they gave up for Carson Wentz. It's not like they gave up, a farm for for example, like a Matthew Stafford like the Rams did. And obviously that worked out for them. But the Commanders, I believe they only gave up a second round pick and then a third round pick and then I believe a conditional third round pick for 2023. Is there a sort of sense in the building that Carson Wentz is going to be that guy, or do you think that it's still very up in the air at the moment?
I do think they gave up too much for him, even considering where they were at. I think the thing, 2 third-round picks, especially when you look at like what Mitch Trubisky got in free agency, when you look at some of the other market deals, I think they gave up a lot. I guess I don't know if I should say too much because quarterback, you can never give up too much if he really is the guy. But I think they paid a steep price for him. I mean, 2 third-round picks, one conditional being a second rounder if he plays a certain amount of snaps next year. That's a lot of draft capital. And then I think the bigger thing is that they assumed all of his $28 million cap hit for this year instead of daring the Colts to cut him and then trying to sign him in free agency. I think that I think they gave up a lot of assets for a guy that the Colts wanted to move on from no matter what. Is there a sense and ability that he can be the guy? That's an open question, but I would say we don't have enough information yet. I know Ron Rivera and others have kind of pumped up his relationships, his ability to blend in the locker room, which has been a concern at his last two stops. But to me, if you're throwing passes in shorts and jerseys and a helmet in June, there just inherently isn't going to be, real stress tests of can he be a good teammate? Can he take hard coaching? Which obviously have dogged him in his last two stops. So to me, that's a question you can't really answer until September.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you on that one. One other question I had for you before we get into a record prediction from you. Obviously Terry McLaurin, he got signed to an extension yesterday. What did you think of that extension? Because I know when I first saw it, I was doing the math on the average per year, and it's lower than what AJ Brown got. And I know at least my podcast host, who's not able to join us today, he's a Seahawk fan. So he's, of course, looking at those numbers, hoping for the Seahawks to pay DK Metcalf. And I know I was a little bit shocked to see that he was getting, I think just around 1.5 to 1.8 million less per year, than AJ Brown is getting. So obviously it doesn't look super great for DK Metcalf. But what did you think about, the Terry McLaurin deal?
Yeah, to me, if you're going to go shorter, if you're going to go 3 years instead of, Devontae going 5, Tyreek going 4. I know like he got like a Cooper Kupp-esque deal, I think, with the 3 years and the structure. To me, it's less about the APY and it's more about the guarantees, especially when you talk about this wide receiver market that's really exploded this offseason. Like Terry got more than $50 million guaranteed. He got $28 million in signing bonus. I think the highest signing bonus or one of the highest, at least this year. So, I mean, like, I thought it was a pretty strong deal if you're going to go for the shorter term and if you're going to go for guaranteed money, which to me, I mean, he didn't have those void years. This doesn't have the funny money that an Alvin Kamara deal has. And so to me, yeah, the APY doesn't pop and, you're not locked in through 2027 like the Raiders have Devontae Adams, but for the player, it seems to be a pretty strong deal in that you got all that money guaranteed. You got a lot of money guaranteed.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on that. I believe $28 million in the signing bonus, and I think that was the most that any receiver has gotten, in the signing bonus. So, moving on to the Commanders of this year's team. What are some expectations you have? I think, especially you look at their schedule. And obviously you get to play the NFC East, which is one of the weaker divisions in football. You get to play the NFC North, which is, admittedly one of the weaker divisions in football. And then, you still, I believe you guys are playing is it a third or a fourth place schedule? I believe it's a third place schedule. So,
Third, yeah.
You get to play, teams like, let's see who's on here. I believe you guys, or the other division you guys are playing is you guys are playing the AFC South, who's another weaker division. What are the expectations you think this year for the Commanders?
I mean, they have to take a concrete step forward. When you win 7 games in each of the last 2 years and you turn over the roster and now this is really Ron Rivera's unit, you have to show that, hey, our bets paid off. We're really making progress toward, if not Super Bowl contention, at least contention in the NFC East every year, which I think would be progress over the next 2 years. So I would say you have to win at least 9, somewhere between 9 and 11 games. And Carson Wentz has to be the guy that you think he is rather than the guy that most of the NFL seems to think he is. So, I mean, the expectations are pretty high. The expectations, especially on defense with the talent they have, is to be much better. And I think those are the big questions heading into the year. It's tough to say. I do think that they will be better because Taylor Heinicke is not an NFL starting caliber quarterback, and they still won 7 games with him. Carson Wentz, I think, is a significant upgrade, but at the same time, he's not perfect. So they're certainly higher this year, but I wouldn't pretend that you'll be seeing them on conference championship weekend or anything like that.
Right. And if you were able to put, like a number or, a range of their win totals, what do you think the Commanders' record is going to be?
I would have to say that I think they're going to be 10-7. I think that especially when you're talking about a schedule, as you've noted, it's one of the weaker ones in the NFL. You especially have, I think the biggest thing is that Ron Rivera's teams historically have gone on. They're streaky teams. They'll lose a lot of games. They'll win a lot of games in a row. And to me, you have a great opportunity this year to start fast when you're playing Jacksonville at home and then at Detroit. Like if you can't go 2-0 in that stretch, then I would say like that's a concern because these teams, Ron Rivera's teams in 2020, started 2-7 and made a late push in like a historically bad division to make the playoffs. Last year started slowly, didn't finish that push just by putting a 4-game win streak together after the bye. So I mean, this is a team that really is streaky and has had trouble starting fast. So if you can do that, I think the expectations, you have a much greater chance of reaching those expectations if you can take the gimmies at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. This roster, especially offensively, is sort of they have a lot of talent. Again, you look at Carson Wentz, you look at Antonio Gibson in the backfield, J.D. McKissick. He winds up staying in Washington after I believe I can't remember who he had already agreed on a deal with. Buffalo, that's right, correct, Buffalo. You even look at that, that receiving core of, obviously Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, and then they draft Jahan Dotson in the first round. I didn't think he was going to go as high number wise. I thought he was still a first round talent. I didn't think he was going to go all the way up at 16, which is where the Commanders were able to get him. Sam, I can't thank you enough for joining me.
Of course, Emmitt. Thanks so much for having me, man.
No problem. If there's anything you want to, if you want to plug, feel free to do so.
Oh no, just the Washington Post. You can find my work at the WashingtonPost.com. You can find it on Twitter at Sam4TR, SAM4TR. Other than that, I appreciate you having me.
Of course. This has been the C Team Podcast. Thank you guys for joining.